What is up, everyone? I'm Ryan from Fireside Knicks, and I'm here with Dylan today. We're talking about the Knicks just coming off of a back-to-back games. They swept those and they won it. So they're in a great position with the 5 seed. Miami dropped the first 2 games following the All-Star break. So the Knicks have started to build a little bit of a cushion in that 5th seed, or the 6th seed, excuse me. And they're vying for that 5th seed, man. I mean, they are in a pretty good spot this week to get themselves at least close to that, either close or even potentially get themselves ahead in the 5th seed this week. So they play a lot of really good teams this week. I'm really excited to see how they stack up against some of the better teams, or some of the teams that are kind of around them in the Eastern Conference. I'd say Boston's definitely better than them right now, but Miami and Brooklyn are teams that they're on your level. You are expected to beat them at this point, and this can change your playoff outlook. So the Knicks have played really well lately. Julius Randle's been awesome. There are a lot of different things to talk about from the last 2 nights. But Dylan, first and foremost, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. And thank you for having me come on again. I'm ready to talk about some Knicks, and let's just get started. So you mentioned the Heat. They lost their 2 games out of the break. Pretty bad losses too. They lost by quite a bit in games. They've won their first 2 out of the break. So I really like where this team's going right now. And also this week, what you mentioned before, they got a big games coming up. They got Boston on Monday, and then Brooklyn, and then Miami. So they got a big week coming up in that regard. At right now with that stuff.
Yeah, I 100% agree in terms of the position we're at right now, where the Knicks, not saying that, this week is going to be do or die, and that if they don't win this week, or if they do win this week, they either A, are going to be the 5th seed, or B, they have no shot the 5th seed. But this week is definitely a pivotal week in that regard. And Knicks are in a position where they control their own destiny, which I think is important here. You really want to avoid situations where you're relying on other teams to win or other teams to lose in order to put yourself in position to be in the 5th seed or the 6th seed. If they don't get the 5th seed, it's obviously not great. You'd prefer the 5th seed over the 6th seed, but I think the gap between the 6th and 7th seed is obviously massive because of the play-in. You need to make sure you're at least the 6th seed entering the postseason. But they've gotten great performances lately from Julius Randle. Julius Randle is on a different planet right now. I don't really know how else to put it. He is absolutely phenomenal, and he's been incredible for the Knicks all year, but he's really turned it on lately when the Knicks have needed him most. Brunson's come out the gate not as hot as he was in February, but that's fine because, again, Randle's played so well. What do you see about Julius Randle's game, not just lately, but this year in total, that has allowed him to, really transform his game, and I'd say even improve from where he was his first All-Star year with the Knicks?
Right. So Randall's been phenomenal. Like you said, he's been phenomenal all year, but something I've noticed since the rotation change, really, he's turned it up on a different level. He's been just going crazy, really, to put it bluntly. He's been scoring very, very highly, and he's doing it efficiently too. He's having one of his more efficient seasons in quite a while. And also, he's doing it in all different parts of the court. He's shooting the threes well. He's getting into the paint. He's a monster in the paint and one machine, and he's hitting his free throws. That's a big thing I've noticed, especially clutch free throws. Last year he had that issue where he was missing clutch free throws when we need him most. He's making them this time, so that's a big step right there. And I just think it seems like he's just more into it than he was last year. Last year, he'd have those moments where he just didn't really seem like he was into it, kind of seemed out of it a little bit. This year, he seems like he's much more in tune with everything that's going on, and he's just it's paying off. He's having a great season, probably the best season of his career. Really, he's up to now 25 points a game, which is a career high, and he's got the double figures in rebounds too. So I think in a night out, you're getting exactly what you like last year. You didn't know which version of him you were going to get. Right now, though, he's going to get you probably like 20 plus points, get you close to 8 to 10 rebounds a night. He's going to hit a couple threes. You know he's going to get you that every night. At this point, it's pretty standard when he gets nights like last night where he had like what 28 points, 7 rebounds, like 5 assists, something like that. It's pretty standard at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and the really the great thing about this too is he's doing this on the best efficiency of his career. In terms of true shooting percentage, or well, not as of his career, but in his career as a Knick. And I'd also say the true shooting percentage is, I think it's the best of his career in my opinion because he's taking threes now, right? Like, not saying that putting up a high true shooting percentage is bad if you're a center, but it's not as valuable because you're taking easier shots. Randall is taking 8 threes a game, right? And he's shooting nearly 35% from three. That tells you he's a guy that, is going to shoot. He's not afraid to shoot. He is a guy who will definitely just pull up from beyond the arc, 3 seconds into a shot clock, and try to push some offense, and he'll hit some of those. So, looking at Randall's play this year, the offensive side of the ball, it's really been amazing to watch. As you mentioned, 25 points per game, an efficient 25 points per game. You just can't, that's not something you can necessarily just replicate. So I'm very, very, very happy with his performances this season, and especially lately. He's put this team on his back. But two players we talked about in the previous episode we did were RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. And we talked about how important they are to the Knicks when they post All-Star break. Mitchell Robinson coming back from injury, and then RJ Barrett, struggling a lot in the first half and kind of needing him to pick it up in the second half. I think the last two games, we've seen both of these players have big shots in RJ Barrett in the fourth quarter, in the first game out of the break against Washington. And then you have what was an absolutely amazing defensive performance the last two nights of Mitchell Robinson in my eyes. These two guys have been pivotal for the Knicks these last two games. They haven't put up amazing stats or anything like that, but they've filled their role. And kind of a really good way to put this is I think RJ Barrett is finally just playing good basketball. What do you think about these last two games for RJ Barrett? How do you think these are important for his confidence? And how do you think that he can use this momentum going forward?
RJ Barrett, he's been, great. He's last two games, he's been much better. He looks more in rhythm. Something I noticed against Washington, he had a couple big shots, but something I really noticed was the defense. He was much better defensively. He seemed way more in sync. He was at, lot more effective on that end, which was something that was giving him problems for quite some time. And, last night against New Orleans, he had 25 points in the season high, 7 assists, which, was great. He was moving the ball and he was scoring efficiently. He shot pretty well. In one of his more efficient nights from outside the arc, too, last night in quite a while, he shot 4 of 7 from three, which I think is big. Not just, 3-point shooting is great, but, the fact that he's scoring at both the inside and the 3-point efficiently is huge because we didn't really have that kind of he didn't really seem like he was in sync for quite a while, which was definitely alarming. It definitely needed to be addressed, and it seems like so far that slowly he's come out of the break in a much more better rhythm, which I think is huge. We need him to play at his best to get a chance to jump to that fifth seed, or even the fourth seed if we really can get red hot. But if we definitely want to reach like the fifth seed and get to the playoffs, I definitely need RJ to continue playing like how he did last night. I think that's the biggest thing right there. And you also touched on Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson came back from injury. He's posted 2 straight double doubles. I think that's huge. He doesn't really look like he lost a step at all. You always wonder, come back from an injury, if he's going to be a little slow or if there's going to be some things that are look a little off. So far, he looks great. And I think, needless to say, the Knicks desperately missed his offensive rebounding, his defense, things like that. His just his force in the paint. I think they really missed that. And so far, having him back has been huge. We've right now we're at full strength, and I think like being at full strength right now is the best time to be at that because we need to start. We need to just keep winning these games to get to the best spot we can get come playoff time, and definitely build chemistry too. With Mitch back, and now we have Josh Hart, so it just continues to build chemistry with the entire unit as a whole, and I think that's huge right there. Because then come playoff time, we could be a really scary team, which I definitely think is something that's possible.
Yeah, this team is definitely in a position where at least, and I definitely agree with you there on how important RJ is to this team going forward. But I think that if you have a positive RJ Barrett in terms of impact, right? RJ Barrett's giving you positive impact night in, night out with this starting lineup. As you mentioned, you have depth. You have Josh Hart, Emmanuel Quickly, Isaiah Hardenstein, and Obi Toppin coming off that bench. This team is deep, right? Like this team, if RJ Barrett can get it going, right, this team doesn't have a bad player in the rotation, right? And I think that's something that the Knicks have done so well this year. They have kept their rotation kind of clean in a sense of, any players that you look at and say they are a net negative on the floor. You need them off the floor as much as possible. That's played to their hand very well. We've talked about Emmanuel Quickly a lot. Emmanuel Quickly is continued to be excellent, right? And you can't really ask for much more than that, right? He's a guy who just continues to play at a really high level. This team has a lot of guys who kind of glue in very well. We talk, Hart kind of fills in a similar role, even though Josh Hart hasn't had, the first two games out of the All-Star break have been positive impact games, despite the fact they aren't as impressive in the stat sheet, as some of his earlier games as a Knick. That's part of what being a glue guy is, right? These guys can go out there and really, not saying they can have bad games and perform well, but they can have, not great scoring nights, or they can be very passive on the scoring side of the ball, impact the game in multiple different ways. And that's something you love to see. And you mentioned this with Barrett, just some of the big shots he's hitting, right? Kind of consistently all year, despite the struggles, he's hit big shots. This team has, earlier in the year, they struggled with closing. I feel like lately they've looked a lot better in that regard. Even last night, you're like, oh, they're going to let this game get away from them. They're up 27, and then, Pelicans start chipping away, and the Knicks slam the door on them, right? This team doesn't, not that they're not going to blow any more leads, or not that this team is never going to have a closing issue again, but I feel like they've taken a step up in the closing department. They have guys they can turn to get them big buckets, and it's kept the offense diverse. If you're looking down this stretch, or especially this week, you're looking at, games against Brooklyn, Boston, Miami. These are teams that are going to be vying for the 6th and 5th seed. Who do you think in this offense is going to have a big week? We've seen Randle have big stretches, Brunson have big stretches. Is it one of those two guys? Is it someone else potentially in the rotation? Who do you think is going to have that big week and potentially propel the Knicks even further into the 5th seed?
Right. I definitely think it's Julius Randle. He's just been, like I mentioned before, on a completely different level, and I think he's going to continue to do just that with these games coming up. We saw last time the Knicks played the Celtics, Randle had like 37 points or something like that. A big night, basically carried us all the way up to that, that overtime victory. And I definitely think he's in line for another big week as we go down the stretch. And something I've noticed with Randle, he seems like he's having a lot of fun, which was something that, we didn't really see a whole lot of last year. Last year we saw, quite a bit of, tumultuous, relationships he had with the team, whether, it was the time against the Lakers last year when he got at it with the coach, and, other times where he just, seemed a little lethargic on the floor, walking slowly up the floor, or not really seeming like he was in tune. Right now he seems like he's having fun. And I think I noticed last night when quickly threw that lob off the backboard to Randle, that was like the big time when I was like, yeah, he loves what's going on right now with this team, and I definitely think that's a huge thing going forward, because if if your star player is enjoying his time right now, then he's only going to get better. And right, like I mentioned before, he's been just phenomenal in pretty much everything. And last night too, I noticed his defense. He had Brandon Ingram in jail basically, dude. He was great defensively in that regard. And Brandon Ingram's not no slouch. He's one of the better scorers in the NBA. So that's a big thing right there. So if he can continue to do things like that and just be aggressive, attack the paint, shoot the ball well, he's in line for another big week. And I definitely think if he does have another big week, that can help propel the Knicks to another good week. And hopefully we gain more ground on Miami, maybe even surpass Brooklyn if we, take a win over them, or if they continue to struggle, and get up to even the 5th seed, which, before the season, I don't think many fans would have said we were going to be the 5th seed, but that's a real possibility right now. And with the way they're going right now, I definitely can see it happening.
Oh yeah, and this team's headed in the right direction, right? I think end of the day, I think we're climbing towards. I think I've said this before with like that ceiling of a team that doesn't have an MVP caliber player, right? They're reaching that type. They're heading towards that ceiling where like they are playing about as good as you can play without one. They've been phenomenal really since they've cut it down to a 9-man rotation. They're undefeated since acquiring Josh Hart. This team is getting hot at the right time. This team getting Mitchell Robinson. You mentioned Julius Randle and how he had Brandon Ingram in jail. This team's interior presence, it's night and day with Mitchell Robinson on the court, right? Because now Randle and Hartenstein, not saying that they're, Hartenstein's definitely not a bad defender. Randle, I wouldn't say I would trust him on a big man, necessarily, because there is that level, just the size disadvantage there. But Mitchell Robinson's clearly the best interior defender of that group of three. And he's shown it, right? And now that you have him there, it makes, as you mentioned, a guy like Randle able to kind of, he doesn't have as difficult of a job in terms of interior defense. He doesn't have to carry as big of a load. Mitchell Robinson's just kind of, he's hounded people on the glass. Another thing too is the rebounding, right? Some of the offensive boards and defensive boards.
He's a monster down there.
The
He
Knicks were
gets
not
all those
getting those.
offensive boards, saves a lot of possessions,
Absolutely.
which I think is huge because, second chance points are huge in today's NBA. Any team can light it up and get red hot and just drill you. So, if you're having off nights from shooting, but if you have Mitch down there to help save those possessions and create second chance opportunities, that's huge. That goes a long way. And that's a big reason why, quite frankly, the Knicks have never been out, really not been out of a game that often this year. Even like they may be up by a lot and they may come close, but when you really look at it hindsightly, they haven't really been out of a game this year. And I think a large part of that is because of Mitchell Robinson. He's been, the offensive rebounding has just been phenomenal. He's basically he's just a full-on force down there in the paint. You could go for him for lobs. You can rely on him for the rebounds. He does basically everything you need him to do down there and be a traditional center, which, not many teams have like a traditional center these days, but he's one of those. He's a really, really key piece, which is why getting him back right now in time for this playoff push was a huge step. Hartenstein and Sims held down the fort really well when Mitch was out. Credit to them, they did great. But now that Mitch is back and he seems like he's healthy enough to continue to contribute, you know, we're in line for a good run, really good run coming up. And I definitely think, like you said, just reiterate the point one more time, that Mitch is going to be a key piece going forward. And I definitely think, he's a big reason why we've been as good as we are this year in the second chance opportunities and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, there's a reason why this team is seventh in net rating in the NBA, according to ESPN. Right, there's a reason for that. This team has lost, I think I'm counting here, I think maybe 2 or 3 games since December by a margin of over 10 points, right? Like, that's crazy. This team loses close and wins big, and that's a sign of a good team. Whatever sport you play, whatever this translates to any sport you ever play. If you win big and you lose small, and you're going to be a really good team most likely over a large sample size. This team has played really well. I don't want people to sit here and say, oh, well, they're not going to win the finals or anything. Knicks fans, I want you guys to be prepared to hear stuff like that, because people are mad that they were wrong about the Knicks, right? Coming into the year, first thing was, Jalen Brunson's overpaid. The next thing was, they have, they're good, but they're not going to stay good forever. Then, they had that rough stretch, and it's like, well, the Knicks are back in, that kind of that hell of purgatory. And now the Knicks are really good, and people don't really know what to say other than, well, they're not going to win the finals. I think that coming into this year, winning the
And
finals was not something we
shout
had on the
out
table,
Kendrick
right? That's
Perkins,
not
because
on the
Kendrick
table.
Perkins has been giving the Knicks love all year. So shout out Kendrick Perkins. He's been giving the
Yep.
Knicks love all year.
Absolutely. And, end of the day, I look at this roster, I look at this team, I look at how they've played, and this team is playing really good basketball. Defensively, they're doing better, right? I think the defense is definitely something, the perimeter defense is something that you're going to be concerned about in a postseason series against a team that's better than you, right? But in a postseason series against a team that's better than you, especially in the NBA, typically you're like heavily favored against, right? You're not going to walk into a Boston series and it's going to be close odds. Boston's going to be pretty heavily favored to win that series. But if you're entering a series against Brooklyn or Cleveland or Miami, you have a chance to get past the first round, which I think is huge. And then number 2, we've seen teams that rely on just a team that's really hot offensively to get on a deep postseason run. If this team gets to the second round, or by some miracle gets to an Eastern Conference Finals, this is beyond any expectations anyone could have had for this team. This week's critical for that, because if the Knicks go out and get swept over this next week, the mood kind of changes. The feeling around this season, or not the feeling around the season, but the feeling around the Knicks as a playoff team changes, right? But if this team goes out and wins 2 out of 3 games, they beat Miami, they beat Brooklyn, let's say they drop the game to Boston, that is a good week. That's more than a good week in my eyes. Maybe you feel differently, but I feel like that's beyond a successful week. That's more than I could
That's
possibly bargain.
perfect. That's like, I would take that any day of the week. I would love that. And I definitely think, I agree with what you said, that the mood will change if they were to get swept in the playoffs. Not playoffs, I'm sorry, in the series right here. But, I definitely think, going forward, let's say the Knicks get in the playoffs, right? Me personally, I'm gonna get a little opinionated here, but I think I like their chances against like Philly and Cleveland. I like their chances against them because they've seemed to handle those 2 teams, especially, really well in the regular season. And I know they're 2-2 against Philly, but really they should be 3-1. They had that bad game against Philly a couple weeks ago where they blew that third quarter big lead or whatever. I definitely think though, like, I like their chance against them. Will I like definitively say that they'll move past them? I can't really say that because I don't know, but I like their chances. I think they can make it a series, and I don't think they're really an easy out. I don't think they're necessarily an easy out because the Knicks are going to be one of those teams where like you're not going to want to play them in the playoffs because they're never out of a game. They always find a way, even if they're down big, they find a way to make it close. They find a way to come back and make it close. Even if they don't complete the comeback, they do make it close and competitive down the final stretch of games, which I definitely think other teams need to kind of take notice of that and see like, this team is like not no slouch. This is a team that can make some serious noise if they get all their pieces clicking.
And end of the day, like, dude, this team is well, like this team is not a team you want to play in the postseason. I'm sorry, you mentioned Philadelphia. I'm no disrespect to the 76ers. They don't want to run into the Knicks in the first round. You want Brooklyn. I'd even say you might want Miami. Like, you don't want the Knicks right now. You don't, right? This is not a team you want right now. Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson can score with anyone in this league, really. I mean, that's a big thing here, too, right? Going into a postseason series, you know you're going to rely on your star players a lot more. You know you're going to rely on those two guys a lot, right? And if we look at the Atlanta series, they really struggled because Julius Randle wasn't perfect. And Julius Randle not being perfect was the death sentence of this team, right? But end of the day, if Julius Randle doesn't have a great night, Jalen Brunson's there. If Jalen Brunson has a good night, Julius Randle's there. They have two guys who can give you 40 on a really good night. That tells you something about this team. Emmanuel quickly can come off the bench and give you 15, 16, 17, not just 16, 17, by shot chucking, because that's a narrative that I think is so dumb with Emmanuel quickly, right? He can do it very efficiently. Grimes can hit some pretty big threes for you. RJ Barrett seems to turn it on in the fourth quarter.
Quickly can do it
Yep,
efficiently, and I think a big thing about Quickly too is, even if he's having a bad shooting night, he's impactful in every other part of the game. He's moving the ball well, he continues the pace, and his defense, he plays great defense. He doesn't just, he doesn't slow down
absolutely.
on defense if he's having an off shooting night. He just continues to turn it up, and I think that's a big thing with him. I think that's a huge thing. You mentioned Grimes too. If Grimes can get his shot going, I know Grimes has had a bit of a struggle late, but he seemed to get it a little bit going last night. He hit a couple threes, so if he can get it going too, bring back that nice little two-way sense we have of him, then that'll be another key piece right there. Josh Hart, and Hartenstein's improved rebounding over this season that I've definitely noticed. He's gotten way more active on the glass, which has been huge, and his defense too has improved. So right now, I mean, like we got a deep squad. So like they're not an easy out at all. Not at all. You don't, and like you said, they have two guys you can rely on. The whole argument before was, oh, the Knicks don't have a star. They don't have a star. Right now we have two. We have two. We have one that was an all-star and probably will make an all-NBA team at this point with how he's playing with Julius Randle,
Yeah,
and
and
Jalen Brunson,
as you
who quite
mentioned,
frankly should have been an all-star, averaging nearly 24 a game and a very efficient number.
yeah, and as
So,
you mentioned, being a
we
team
have
that
like two
has
guys right
two
there that are
high level
like
scores like that, they're
our
gonna they're gonna
stars.
be a tough they're gonna be a tough out, man. I'm gonna give my final thoughts here and hand it off to you to kind of see how you feel about this week and kind of I guess not predictions per se, but just kind of a feel as to what we talked about what a successful week would look like. Just how do you think this week plays out? Personally, I view it as I think the Knicks are gonna I have a weird feel. I have a feeling they're going to lose that game to the Celtics. They've won 5 straight if you count, the games prior to the All Star break. So the Celtics are a team that's better than the Knicks right now. They're probably the best team in the East. That's a game you probably drop. I think they win against Miami and Brooklyn. I hope I don't sound like I'm a biased extent. I think they should be not saying that they should expect to win big, but they should expect to win. If this is a close game, this team is ready to push themselves. This team's ready to handle a close game, a dogfight against teams that are around their level. You have the best player on the court in the game against the Nets. The Heat have Jimmy Butler, but you feel like you can get close. You feel like the roster around him isn't good enough to necessarily say that team should that because they have the best player on the court, they should beat you, right? You have the better talent surrounding your best players. So I think the Knicks go 2-3 this week. I think I have to agree with you on the Julius Randle thing. I think Randle is going to have a big week this week. He's been shooting too well for me to feel like it's not his week this week.
Right. And I agree with what you said. You know, they're probably going to drop a game against Boston. I'd be more than happy if they won that game, like they beat Boston a few weeks ago. But Boston's a great team. They're first in the East. They're one of the best teams in the NBA. They look poised to go back to the finals. So, when reality sets in, they're just a better team. So, you could expect them to probably take down the Knicks on Monday night. But you know, I definitely think they can beat Brooklyn and Miami too. I definitely do. They handled Miami earlier this season. I know it was a close game at the very end, but they did handle them. And they just manhandled Brooklyn a few weeks ago. It was a close game through the first 3 quarters, but then just dominated the fourth quarter. And also, Brooklyn just suffered a really bad loss against the Bulls, like a really bad lost by nearly 50 points at one point in that game. So I think that game right there might have been a little bit of a wake up call to like Nets fans, like, this is a new reality. We're not, necessarily that big juggernaut squad we were in the beginning of the season when we had Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. So, not necessarily saying the Nets can't do anything, but, they're definitely a weaker version of themselves now than they were a few weeks, before the deadline. So I definitely think, with that settling in still for them, they can definitely handle the Nets again, and Miami too. Miami has, Miami's above 500, but it doesn't feel like they are because they've been very, very inconsistent all season long. They're literally the worst scoring team in the NBA by numbers. They average the least amount of points per game at like 108 or something like that. They're one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league. They have Jimmy Butler, they have Bam Adebayo, who are great players, but when the supporting cast around them is not playing very strong and quite frankly being a detriment to them, you know, we definitely have the edge in that because we have two stars ourselves that can match up with Butler and Bam, and we have the better supporting cast. We have Hart, we have Quickly, we have Barrett, we have Grimes. We have the guys that are definitely capable of uplifting this team and getting us over that edge. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. I think they go 2-1 this week with the 3 game stretch against those Big East teams. They're probably gonna, they might lose the Boston game. If they can win the Boston game though, I think that'll be a huge confidence boost because then that'll be like for not only for fans per se that they'll have more faith in this team, but the team itself might be like, okay, we are really capable of making some noise if we can take down one of the best teams in the NBA,
Yeah, if this team could
on our
punch
home floor
up
too.
and
I
kind of
think that'll be a big
take down a
confidence boost
Celtics
all
team that
around
is
if they can
extremely
do
good. They've
things like
beaten the
that.
Celtics before. That's if you somehow, and I'm not saying this team, if they don't go 3-0, it's a disappointment. If this team somehow figures out a way to go 3-0 this week, that I think that changes a lot of. You ask a lot. We're going to be asking some different questions about the Knicks if this team goes 3-0.
Right. If they go 3-0, you mean that they're in another 8 game win streak, and you also, like
Right.
you said, it changes questions about the Knicks. Now you start thinking, okay, is this team actually poised to make like a deep run rather than is this team going to make it out of the first round? Now you start to think, can this team make the Eastern Conference Finals, and if they get really hot, can they even make the finals? This team, like, because if you look too, if they do win the 3 straight,
Yeah.
their record will be 38-27. For any team, that's a really good record through 65 games in a season. That's a really good record. That's not just like, oh, team got red hot. That's a really good record. That's a sign of, you're a good team. You're not a slouch. You're a great team. So I definitely think, like you said, if they go 3-0, that changes everything. And I definitely think, you'll start hearing more about the Knicks if they were to go
Yeah.
3-0. You'll start hearing more about like what this team is actually capable of and like how far they can really go. It's more than just, oh, the Knicks, they're just hot right now, but then they won't do anything in the playoffs. No, like if they can reach like the 5th seed or even the 4th seed if they get red hot, because they're not that far off the 4th seed. They're only a couple losses behind Cleveland in that 4th seed. So that's also, in our radar too. Right now, 5th seed is right within our reach, but 4th seed is right there as well. So we can definitely make some big noise. I definitely think they're poised to get something going if they just continue this hot stretch they're on right now. Because right now they're playing all around great basketball on both ends. They're playing better defensively. Their offense has been ridiculous. I saw a thing on ESPN this morning. They said like they've scored 115 plus points in several games in a row now in this winning streak. So they're scoring
Yeah,
really,
absolutely.
really high
And,
numbers.
I
They're
guess the
they're
best way to put
really
it
lighting
is
it
this
up on the
week's a big
floor, and I
week. This
definitely think
week is going
that'll
to
help
change
them
the
big
way you
time.
talk about the Knicks potentially for this season. And I'm very excited for what is a high stakes week. I love it. I love the playoff hunt. I love the chase. I love the excitement, the thrill, getting to see these guys kind of in a more. Yeah, absolutely. High pressure environment. You know,
Yes, they got a lot going on, so it's definitely going to be
this isn't
something
November
big to
anymore. You're trying
watch.
to figure out your rotation. This is do or die for the Knicks. It feels like, or for not just the Knicks, but the Nets, the Heat. You know, all these teams involved in the playoff race. Oh yeah,
And right now we're at full strength too with Mitch back. So now it's literally full steam ahead. We're sending out everybody.
absolutely.
We're getting best we
Yeah,
can right now. This is the best look you're gonna have at what the Knicks could be like in the playoffs. This is the best look right here because they're playing three teams that are in that hunt for the playoffs. So this is the best look right here to see like just a
yeah.
Knicks team
And
at
end
full
of the day,
strength
you know, I'm
would
very
perform in
excited.
the
I'm
playoffs.
very
This
excited,
is
and I think a
this
lot of
is the
Knicks
time
fans
to
should be
see
very
that to
excited.
see
Thank you guys so
how they
much for
would do
checking
that.
us out. We love that you guys are supporting us. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow the Twitter Fireside Knicks. You know, we're doing great things over here at the Knicks, so we've got a lot of new content coming out. So we'll see you guys in the next video, and peace out.